Hello again, and welcome to another one of our museum COVID-19 shutdown videos. Today I want to take a look at the museum's Michigan State Troops exhibit. As you can see here, currently occupies two cases. First case here, so for those of you who are not familiar, Michigan State Troops were created in 1917 by a public act and basically replaced the National Guard. So prior to World War I, a lot of what we currently attribute as state police functions were done by the National Guard. A lot of the rural policing and things like that. The National Guard were used quite frequently for these kind of things. 1913, they were used to police the copper strike and things like that. So 1916, 1917, the National Guard is federalized. Michigan National Guard was one of the first to go. They were sent down to the border for the punitive expedition. And then 1917, virtually all the National Guards were stood up for World War I. A lot of the states, and Michigan was not the only one, but a lot of states created state defense forces, which took the place of the National Guard during times where the National Guard was federalized. World War I, there were two branches in Michigan. There was the Michigan State Troops Temporary Force and the Michigan State Troops Permanent Force. The temporary force, from what we can find, was more of I think probably more in line with like a fraternal organization. And the permanent force was much better organized, much better equipped. A lot of companies created their own units. I know for one that the REO, the Ransom E. Olds factory in Lansing, had their own state guard unit, and that actually had a REO built armored car that they patrolled with and things like that. So this case here, this is a Michigan State Troops World War I uniform. So you have the jacket, or the tunic, which I find to be somewhat interesting because to me it looks very much like a maternity dress, but that's maybe just my opinion, but it is kind of an interesting cut. By regulation, the uniforms were supposed to look military, but be different enough to not be confused with military. So they had the leggings and the trousers, and then up here we have a photograph of a Michigan State Troops person these photos were very popular. Up here we have the Fowlerville Home Guard taken in 1918, and some other information. For more information, obviously, we encourage you to come see the museum once we reopen. Interesting is that World War I ends, the Michigan State Troops are stood down. The Michigan State Troops Permanent Force is stood down, and then the next day it stood back up again as the Michigan State Police. So this is really the birthplace of the State Police Department. It came out of the Permanent Force. World War II comes around and the Michigan State Troops are stood back up again. They're much better equipped, much better organized, much better trained at this point in time. This particular uniform belonged to Lieutenant Harold Wedding. Yeah, he served multiple tours in the Michigan National Guard through the 30s. And when the Michigan National Guard is federalized, he is mustered out of service. There is a code. We have his paperwork. We have all of this gentleman's paperwork. There's a code on the paperwork that indicates why he was mustered out, but we have not yet been able to find anybody who can tell us for sure what the code means. We assume it was because of his age and that he may have been mustered out based on age at that point in time. He was a sergeant in the National Guard, and he entered the Michigan State Troops shortly after leaving the National Guard as a sergeant, and is promoted to a lieutenant shortly thereafter, and he serves for the duration of the war. This is his uniform. He has an activation ribbon with a star, which tells us he was activated twice. He was out of Saginaw. We know the unit he was with was one of the units that was sent to respond to the 1943 race riots in Detroit. So we're fairly certain that Lieutenant Wedding was in Detroit for the 43 riots. Up here we have some information on him in a photo that comes out of the Michigan State Troops World War II yearbook, and some other information. There's a copy of one of his certificates. The Michigan State Troops is used quite a bit in World War II. They guard the tunnels and the bridges, and they are used in response to the Sojourner Truth Uprising, and they are some of the Michigan State Troops company that's based at Piquette is some of the very first non-Detroit police personnel on scene for the 43 race riots. Everything that we've read is that the Michigan State Troops behaved quite well during the race riots. And there's actually, if you go into the Life magazine photo archive, there are tons of photographs that were taken at the 43 race riots that feature Michigan State Troopers. There's one down here. This is from the Life photo archive. I like it because you can see on the back of this truck, which you probably can't see in this picture, is that the Michigan State Troops had their own license plate for their vehicles that actually says Michigan State Troops on it. And if anybody ever sees one of those license plates, let us know. We really want one for our collection. They're very, very hard to find. So keep an eye out, all of you out there. Down here, this is some more stuff from the Michigan State Troops collection that we have. These are regular World War II field manuals, but you can see they're all marked to various Michigan State Troops units. They had their own wool blankets, as you can see here. And since this exhibit was built, we've acquired a fairly large amount of Michigan State Troops stuff. So this is one of those exhibits that we really want to redo and expand. So hopefully it's one of the projects we'll be able to get to in the future. So if you don't know anything about the Michigan State Troops, you've never heard about them, come on down to the museum, and we've got all these info panels over here that you can read to your heart's content, and you can come and ask us, and we'll try to tell you more about it. And if you want to schedule a research appointment and see some of the stuff we have in storage, you can do that as well. So that's all for now. We'll talk again later on. Thank you very much.